Jade and welcome to the beginning of a kind of reading vlog. I don't think I did an intro, so here's the intro. I've just wrapped up the video, so you'll be seeing me again later. In this video I read Dune by Frank Herbert. This was written in the 60s and it's one of the biggest sci-fi books of all time. I don't know if I could summarize it for you, if I could give you a synopsis. I think you need to go elsewhere for that because I don't know what to tell you. In fact, you don't really need to go in knowing too much. It's set in outer space. We can travel between planets. There's a spice called melange and it's really important to the way this world works and functions. And it's really integral to the heart of the story. I would recommend just going into it and just giving it a minute and just slowly go along with it. Nothing's going to make sense at first. You just have to keep going. I found it okay. If I can find it okay and put the pieces of the puzzle together, I believe in you to be able to I believe in you to be able to as well. I have this like fancy pantsy collector's edition, which is stunning. It's got blue pages that I adore. There's illustrations on the end pages and on the inside of the dust jacket. There's some bonus content that I haven't read yet. It's also got the slipperiest dust jacket known to mankind, and I've dropped this a good couple times and it hurts every time because it's such a beautiful edition and it's not cheap. Yeah, if you haven't read Dune, it's more accessible than you think. I was expecting it to be really dense and the world to just like be so confusing, and it wasn't. It wasn't dense, it was pretty easy to read actually. Not the best writing in the world, but it's okay. That's one of my biggest qualms with the book. I wasn't obsessed with the writing and some of the characters. I wasn't obsessed with the way they were done. But other than that, I thoroughly enjoy this. I'm not going to tell you how I would rate it. I'm going to let you wait and see and find out. If you haven't read the book, I would recommend it. It's going to be a film. Just read the first one. If it's not your thing, don't read the rest of them. Yeah, so continue watching if you want to hear my thoughts about Dune as I read it. Spoilers ahead. You've been warned. So, I'm reading Dune. I'm on chapter 17. I've gone through and put, well, I'm doing it as I go, these little post-it notes with the chapters on. It's a pet peeve of mine when the chapters aren't numbered. Like, I need to know the chapter number. Shmoop actually has like analysis and stuff and summaries on their website for Dune, and I can't read the summaries and stuff if I didn't understand something, if I don't know what chapter number it is. Not that I often need to, it's just that sometimes if I want to make sure I didn't miss anything huge, I go on Shmoop. I'm trying to not kind of read stuff up about it and even try not to use a glossary in the back as much as I can because I want to figure it out for myself. I was so intimidated to read this one because I didn't think I was going to understand it. I thought it was going to be really long and dense and heavy, but actually I've found it a lot easier to read than I expected, and I was surprised by how quickly my brain started to put the pieces together, what's actually going on. I've heard people describe books like that before, that it's like a puzzle and you slowly kind of figure out what's going on, and for me I've always felt like a better expression would be like it's one of those pictures with all the doors covering the full picture and you slowly take away the doors to reveal the picture underneath, because it didn't feel like my brain was actually doing that much work to figure out what's going on. It's more so that eventually the book explained to me what was going on, which isn't the case. I do definitely figure things out before they happen, but I really noticed it with this one. It's like all the subtle little hints, and I think that was done really well. Like a lot of the time I can pick up what's being put down. I mean, the characters help because especially Paul and Jessica, they're so inquisitive, and being that they're Bene Gesserits, they can figure out a lot and tell us. There's also a podcast called Reading Dune that I've listened to the first episode of, and the concept is one of the guys has read Dune many times before. He's read the whole series, a little bit of a Dune buff, and then his co-host is reading Dune for the first time and it's them kind of breaking down what happens and stuff. But from that first episode at least, it was mostly the guy who knows a lot about Dune explaining stuff to the guy that doesn't know stuff about Dune. And like I just said, I want to figure it out for myself, or when the book tells me about it. I mean, this is the thing with like high fantasy and sci-fi and stuff, is that if it's really important and relevant, the book will explain it to you at some point. It's not always the case, of course. Like there have been times in fantasy books where things have happened that I haven't understood, but it's the book's fault, not yours normally. Normally, if that happens, then it won't just be you that doesn't understand. It will be most people that read the book didn't understand what happened. I would rather afterwards, if I didn't understand something, then look into it, but I do want to listen to that at some point. Anyway, I'm, as I just said, chapter 17, which is page 179, so about the 200 way mark, a third of the way through, roughly, just under a third of the way through as a long book. One other thing that I did pick up from the podcast was the guy that had read Dune quite a lot mentioned that a lot of people don't like the writing of Dune, they don't think it's the best. And as a creative writing student, this intrigued me. And he said it's because we go into people's thoughts, and originally I didn't mind that so much because it's done in books. You can go into characters' thoughts. I don't think that in itself is a bad thing. I think the way that Herbert is doing it isn't the best. It's very frequent. I think half of the time he does it, we don't need it. We can understand what the character's thinking or feeling without it from their body language, where they're acting, guessing how a person would feel in the situation that they're in, and unless they're showing some way that they obviously don't feel that way, we can assume that's how they're feeling. There have been times where it's exciting, like I just read the dinner party chapter, and watching Paul, Jessica and Leto, wow, I have no idea how you actually pronounce his name. All of their reactions to all of the kind of conversations was so, sometimes I do think there are times where it works, especially with the whole Bene Gesserit thing. If they're breaking something down that the author wants us to understand, then obviously we need to see it from their perspective. I just think it doesn't need to be as often as it is. But that does kind of also link to two other criticisms I have, that it's very telly, as in it's telling us a lot of stuff rather than showing it. There's lots of exposition worked into dialogue in a not overly natural way. The explanations of the sci-fi and the lore and the kind of the context and stuff, sometimes it works and it just is kind of slipped in, and it's happened more times than I would have liked. The only other thing that I might be able to think against it is similarly to constantly going into people's heads and getting their direct thoughts. We might not need to see things from so many people's perspectives in one scene. Like that scene with the dinner party and we're constantly jumping around worked really effectively. It showed us that they're thinking the same thing, it showed us when they were not thinking the same thing, all the different things that the different people were picking up on. But in other scenes, like the one that keeps coming back to mind is the one with Dr. Yu and Jessica, that conversation, like we didn't need to go into Yu's head there. And this kind of links to something else that I've been thinking. Do we need chapter 2? Do we need to meet our villains and have them explain to us their evil plan? Because a lot of their evil plan has been predicted by the Duke and his people to an extent. I mean, a lot of it has been predicted to this point. The only big thing I think that we're getting is maybe like motive, and or the fact that that assassin guy, who I can't remember the name of, is involved. But they even mentioned him. Leto, or one of them mentioned him, so they know him. The fact that he wants Jessica, maybe, but I don't think we need to know that. And then the big thing is the fact that it's Dr. Yu. He's the double agent. He's the traitor. But again, I think it could have been more interesting if we didn't know that and we were in their heads trying to figure out who it is, trying to figure out if it is Jessica or not. I mean, I don't think we would think it was Jessica because we see Jessica's perspective. But I think it'd be more interesting if we were trying to figure it out along with them and there was a sense of mystery as well. But it feels kind of clumsy. And we haven't switched back to the villains again since that chapter. So I don't know if we will or not, and if not, then it's very inconsistent and clearly just a way of showing us what their plan is. Some other little things, I noticed that he uses presently a lot. When people are talking together in dialogue, they're always using the other person's name, or like Leto's constantly saying son to Paul, and it will just be like 4 lines in a row, 6 even lines in a row, and they'll constantly be using that other person's name, and that just doesn't happen in speech. Like sometimes people do say the other person's name. Not every time they say something will they then use their name again. I let it slide for so long, and then I saw a conversation where it was used 6 times in a row, and I was like, okay, stop. It's technically not great in that it's very fractured. Like so many times he uses a comma instead of and I don't think it's technically grammatically correct, but I like it. I love fragmented writing styles, and I think his descriptions a lot of the time are really cool. I can imagine the scenes really well. I think the way he described people on the outside, he seems to have a really nuanced way of doing it. People can be really creepy and just act in very nuanced, interesting, unique ways. So I think if it wasn't for a lot of these things, the writing would be maybe not technically the best, but interesting and pretty still. Because I'm a creative writing student, I'm aware that it's clumsy. I can't not see it. To counter that point as well, though, it's not dense and it's not really heavy reading. Pacing, I've been perfectly happy with. I've been interested the whole time. Every scene has a lot happening, a lot of moving pieces in. So I've never been bored. I've never been like, well, this is filler, we can cut this. And it's been relatively slow so far, but I'm really enjoying that about it. A lot of other stuff that we're still trying to figure out. We're still not 100% certain how the world at large works, as in with the Imperium and the Emperor and the House Town Company. I mean, we're getting close, but it feels like there's a lot under the surface that we're not aware of yet, because there's like another 5 books, so there has to be more going on, and there's obviously so much more probably with the Bene Gesserits, and there's definitely way more going on with the Freeman. It's all very intriguing stuff. I love the lore. I love how important the planet is, and I know that that was something that the writer was passionate about, and that he was actually inspired by sand dunes, and he did research for an article for a newspaper and instead wrote this book rather than write the article. And how important all of it is. There's definitely so many like metaphors and symbols for like real life stuff. I know that the soldiers for the Imperium, I believe, they can be shortened to SS, which was also a type of soldier that was around in Nazi Germany. It was linking back to that, and there have been so many kind of like metaphors and symbolisms about ruling and how people should rule, and how connected they should be with the planet. We've not talked about Paul's dreams a lot, and he had that dream with a girl. And from the trailer of the film, I thought it was going to be a really big aspect, but it's not come up again yet. So I'm waiting for that to come up again, maybe. I love the Bene Gesserit stuff and how both Paul and Jessica have been trained, and all of that stuff's really interesting. The voice and the nerve controlling and the different languages and just the way they can read people so well. And the things with like the mentats, that's really interesting. And like he's gonna train to be a mentat, he's already on his way. So I was assuming that they were like computers inside humans, or they were like enhanced in some kind of technological way, but it doesn't seem like it. It seems like they just train humans to be super smart and to kind of think of things differently. And it's interesting that he's gonna be both like a mentat and a Bene Gesserit. He's gonna be unstoppable. And it's interesting that Jessica allowed that. I don't know if the Bene Gesserit, like the Reverend Mother, if they know that they've also been training Paul to be a mentat, if they're going to care about that at all. The other thing in kind of that lore stuff I'm wondering about is with the plantologist person and how they keep referring to like Paul and Jessica as fulfilling this prophecy, and they keep referring back to Missionera Protectiva, something to that effect. I don't know if that's a little too well foreshadowed. I think sometimes with the foreshadowings he can be a little bit heavy-handed. I want more of the politics and stuff as well. It's just so interesting. When he read that Bible passage and Dr. Yu got all freaked out about it, that's most definitely linking to him being this Kwisatz Haderach, the Truthsayer, Bene Gesserit stuff. I mean, some of the confusing things is like the difference between like the Imperium and Chaum and how it all works, and like in this dinner party that we just had, there was like a water person and then there was this banker, and I kept getting confused between the two of them and what they both meant. It's interesting Jessica being like a bought concubine. I thought I understood at first, but she is, and she does like handle the domestic matters like a wife would, or she calls herself a secretary. Jessica's fascinating. I love her character so far, and they're not married, but it seems to be a mutual choice. I love how they genuinely seem to love each other. It's a really cool family dynamic that's got going on, because they all genuinely care about each other. There was hinted at one point about the old feud between the two great houses, the Harkonnens and the Atreides. I swear I knew how to say most of these words. I looked them up and now I'm forgetting them all. So I'm assuming that's going to be explained more at some point, why there's a particular feud between the two of them. It's interesting that like the Emperor can buy stock in the spice, and that he can take that. It's so corrupt, but it sounds like that's just how the system works. I really liked the chapter with the worm as well. That was so interesting. And Leto, he seems like to be genuinely a good man, the way he cared about all the people's lives over the spice or the money or anything else. And he's gonna go down. It's been like foreshadowed and prophesied so much that he's gonna die, and it's only a matter of time. And I'm not looking forward to it because he seems like he doesn't deserve it. That is all for this update, I think. I'm really enjoying it so far. I didn't think I'd be enjoying it half as much as I am, but I am. I'm really excited for it to get more intense and complex, because I feel like it has potential to. So it's the next day and I thought I'd give another little update. A lot has happened since we last spoke. I've only read like just over 50 pages. I'm on page 286, chapter 25. Since we last spoke, it's all gone down. I'm filming on my phone, so if the quality is really bad, I apologise. Since the last update, Duncan let it slip that they suspect Jessica for being a traitor, and then she and Hawat had that conversation in the study where she did her Bene Gesserit trick on him and was like, showed him how skilled she really is and how if she wanted to like bring it down she would have done it already and he wouldn't be able to stop her anyway. So I don't know, it was a very interesting conversation. I fully back her up 100% in most things that happen. Oh, and she's pregnant. BT dubs, the gasp that came out of my mouth when I found that out. And obviously he's been really difficult because he thinks he's a traitor and he's just being overly cautious because he's a mentat. But also he never really trusted her and he doesn't trust the Bene Gesserit ways. We don't really know why yet. Everything went down with you, and Jessica worked it out pretty quickly, I think. She suspected him at one point. It was only because Hawat convinced her that it wasn't him. She was like almost onto him. Oh, she's just so cool. And so both Leto died as well as you. I mean, you, it's really hard because he was doing it to get his wife back, which is understandable because he clearly loves her a lot. But, I mean, come on. He's supposed to be really smart, right? He's this doctor. He teaches Paul. I'm not 100% sure of his purpose, but I thought he was some kind of teacher role. So he's supposed to be smart. What are the chances that your wife is still alive? Like, none. But I guess the hope led him to it. Like, I kept thinking, like, this is so frustrating. But then if you think about the quotes in the beginning, there were a few of them where they kind of just, like, go off about how you as the traitor, like, why did you do that? And he like talks about how he knows he's going to be remembered as a traitor, and he is, because we got these history book quotes where he's completely thought of as a traitor. Everyone's frustrated with him, but in his position he's just desperate, and I can fully believe that the Baron like twisted him and kind of corrupted him in some way. Everything's very subtle with the politics and like the way that they poison each other, like how all of the Empire soldiers are dressed as Harkonnens so that the Emperor doesn't get found out that he's like full on supporting a house over another house. So very sly and sneaky and like plans within plans. So I fully believe that the Baron could have like twisted his emotions or manipulated him in some way. I was saying before about how I didn't know if we should have that chapter with the bad guys in the beginning. But because this all come to fruition so quickly, it's made me definitely less annoyed. I still wonder if we could have had it as a surprise and trying to figure it out, but I also acknowledge that we're figuring out a lot of other stuff at the same time. I still feel relatively comfortable in the world. Obviously there's a lot that I don't know, but a lot of it is stuff that the characters don't know, so it doesn't stress me out too much. There was a page that I just read in the last chapter or so where Paul is trying to convince the doctor of his plans, the plantologist, Keynes. Why whenever I come on camera can I never remember their names? I know their names. But he's trying to convince him of his plans and he wants to be emperor, it seems like. Where did this come from, Paul? They kept talking about like this council and this like land something. Oh, what do the great houses of the Landsraad fear the most? Okay, that makes more sense. The Landsraad High Council, we've not, I don't think, come across that before. It seems like it's just the houses, like the council of the great houses. That makes sense. See, nothing's gone too far over my head, and I'm not dumb, but I'm not, like, especially when it comes to politics and stuff, I'm not the best with it. But then again, I have read a few, like, fantasies and sci-fis, and I do tend to follow them relatively easier. It's rare that I struggle with, like, high fantasy or sci-fi or anything. Or if I do, then normally it's not relevant anyway, so it doesn't matter. The only other thing I can think of big note is Paul had his whole awakening thing because of the spice. And at first Jessica was like really scared and stuff, and I was kind of similarly to Paul getting mad at her, like, what did you expect? You wanted this. There was that conversation with the Reverend Mother in the beginning about how she kind of did want to get the Kiswas Haderach, but again, she's probably been brainwashed to think that she really wants this. She probably wasn't fully in control. She probably didn't fully know what it meant, was only kind of hearing what other people said, didn't know, the full extent of what happened. There's a good chance she's just been all her life trained to believe that we want this is a good thing. I love her. She's easily my favourite character. I really liked Duncan. I think he's dead now. And the Doctor, he's such an interesting character, I think. This Leto, keep referring to as Leto, I'm assuming that's kind of some sign of him being in, like, high in command. I mean, I predicted from quite early on that he might be that person, because the Freeman or someone was referring to him as like he's well respected, you know, from that dinner party. There seemed to be more politics going on in that dinner party, and I want to kind of go back to that and figure out what's going on there. In this chapter, actually, I've not read it yet, but I can see that we're going back to the Baron's perspective, so a lot of that stuff I was complaining about before about see with the Baron, I'm less annoyed about now. Oh, the only thing I guess to say is, you know, Paul has his crazy abilities, he can kind of see in the future, but not totally, and there's been a lot of kind of discussion about the strengths and weaknesses of it, which is really cool because it makes it feel a lot more grounded. And he claims that he's not the Kiswat's Haderach. So then is that still a possibility? And if he's not, what is he? And how does he know? He's a seed, he says. What does that mean? I mean, we also had that conversation with, was it Kyle's, it Keynes? What is his name? Kynes. Okay. About how he might be this person that they've been waiting for, this like Lilo Glib person, Lisanne Al Gib. But he seems pretty convinced that he is that person. And I mean, all the prophecies is lined up. Thus far, obviously, we know he is. It's very exciting, and they're on the run constantly at the minute. It's very exciting stuff. I'm really enjoying it. I'm wondering if he is actually going to end up being emperor, if that's something, or if he's going to be happy with the Freeman, because it seems like he predicts that they're going to stay there for a long time, if not forever. And that thing with the dream and this chick still hasn't come into fruition yet, so that's still ahead of us. I wonder if they have some weird connection, and if they do, what it is. Yeah, I'm excited. Okay, so it's the next day. I failed to give an update last night. I haven't actually read at all today, but I wanted to go through my notes before they started piling up again. I think I missed some things that I wanted to talk about in my last update anyway. The Emperor, there was a weird quote about how I wanted Leto to be his son instead, but since then we've also gotten a part about the Emperor and how really he was caged because he wanted his son and he wasn't allowed to have sons. So that's interesting, and it feels like there's lots more going on there. And I don't know if it's just like this sexist attitude that men have to be the heirs. For a second as well, there was a really disgusting quote about like concubines and stuff, and I was like, what if Paul is this emperor? And got really freaked out. Or it could be that feud guy. It's neither of them, because there's another quote, this like journal, this time my father the emperor was like this, so it can't be either of them. Speaking on that note, that we've since got it discovered that the Baron wants Feud to become the emperor, and gonna use his other nephew Rabban to be so horrible to the people of Arrakis that then Feud is gonna come in and save the day. So either he doesn't care about Rabban or he's like obsessed with Feud, and it seems like it's a bit of both, because he also made this disgusting comment at the very end of the chapter about how like Feud is good looking. I want to know how they are his nephews, what relation happened there, why doesn't he have kids of his own, where are their parents, and why doesn't he want to become emperor? Why is he using his nephews to do all of his work? And we have those Sardkuners, the soldiers, are going to try and wipe out the Fremen. Turns out I've been saying it wrong the whole time, so that's fun. And the Baron still doesn't really believe that the Fremen are a threat, but we kind of want him to not believe that they're a threat, because then he's going to underestimate them. And then the other big thing that's happened is that we've met Fremen. Dr. Keynes died as well, and that was upsetting because I liked him. And no one knows that he's dead. Currently, I think they're all going off with the assumption that he's still alive somewhere. There's a lot of like ecology stuff spoken about there, and we have little makers and big makers, and I'm assuming they're worms, and so there must be smaller worms in the ground that like do stuff in the ground. And there was this like big CO2 bubble, and it feels like stuff that's gonna have to be relevant at some point. It might not be, it might just be like world building type stuff, but I sense that Paul and his mother are going to have to learn some of this stuff at some point. But at the very end of that chapter, he said that the worst thing for Arrakis would be a hero. And I didn't 100% follow the logic as to why. Is it just because they don't want to change the landscape after all? Or is it because like a hero moved too quickly too soon? I don't understand why. But Paul is obviously this hero, and it's too late. He's already told the Fremen to trust him. So something bad is coming. And we keep getting these constant foreshadowings of Paul and the flags, like conquering other planets and stuff, and he desperately doesn't want this to happen. I mean, his powers in general, like time-seeing abilities, are interesting because they're quite limited, and about how sometimes knowing the future will change the future. But we keep coming back to this one image, and it's starting to grate on me a little bit. We get it. He doesn't want this to happen, and he seems like a really good guy, so I really hope it doesn't. I think I'd be quite upset if it does. What Dr. Keynes was foreshadowing, it kind of goes hand in hand together. So we'll see what happens there. Oh, also, we can ride worms. We've discovered this. I think that's pretty much ironed out at this point. Both Keynes mentioned it, as well as it was in the Mirage that Jessica saw. Speaking of Jessica, page in my edition, 362, she just kind of comes up with this prayer. Like, she motions with her arm and everyone just like repeats after her and like completes the prayer. What happened there? How did she know that? She was like, something came over her and she just went with it. What happened there? I don't understand. How does she know? And what does the prayer mean? These Fremen have a lot of religious stuff. Like, we also went down to that pool of water and they know exactly how much is there, and they're going to keep building it up until they have enough water to sustain green life on Arrakis. And there was all these prayers, and then with like the water ritual, and it's just like completely going over my head. I'm assuming it's supposed to. I'm assuming even when Paul and Jessica has this stuff down that we're not going to be referencing it. I'm assuming it's just there as like a token to show how much these people appreciate water. But to be honest, I kind of got that even before we were at Arrakis. It didn't take me as long as it like took Jessica when she saw Paul crying, and how much of a symbol that was to these people to realize how important water is. I mean, even when we talked about the palm trees in the very beginning and how a palm tree, or like so many palm trees, equaled 100 people because of the amount of water they took up. They're slow to catch on. I don't know if it's just their privilege. Jessica also keeps referring back to Caladan and how lush and green it was, and it sounds beautiful, and I'm just kind of like, can we go back? Can we go back there at some point, please? I want to be there. Also in that cave, Shani, however you say her name, asked Paul tell her about the water in her home country, and that was the dream in the very beginning of the book. They were in some kind of weird cavern thing and he told her a poem. So I don't know if they're gonna have that conversation again or if he's changed it now. It seems like the way he was dreaming with her in the beginning, and they keep talking about how she's like elfin looking, or I don't know what that means. I'm assuming pretty. Seems like there's gonna be a relationship between the two of them, but we haven't really gotten to seeing them get to know each other. The way he like referred to her by her first name assumes that they have been talking to each other and stuff. We just haven't got to see it. I want to see it. If a relationship is going to bloom out of this, I want to see them get to know each other. It's very kind of plot driven, this book, and not so much character driven, which is fine, but there are like tiny little instances like that where we do kind of just lose touch with the characters. Like, we haven't gone back to the Baron in a very long time, since he said that he was gonna use Keynes, the Doctor, and Hawat, Thufir Hawat, against each other. And then we never saw that happen, so I don't know why we didn't see that. Speaking of relationships, there's one that's quite interesting, and that is Paul's and his mother's relationship. The chapter that I just read literally ended off with Paul saying his mother is his enemy because she's the one that trained him to do all this stuff, I think. And he kept using this like word that begins with J. My mother is my enemy. She does not know it, but she is. She's bringing the jihad. She bore me. She trained me. She is my enemy. I can understand why he's annoyed with her, but I don't understand why she's your enemy, per se. And like, Jessica was talking about how afraid she is of him and how she doesn't understand why he sang a love song to this new chick. Their communication, they haven't spoken since that outburst he had the first night they were on the run. I was expecting when they were in that like cavern thing at the sand slide for them to touch bases and be like, okay, what just happened back there, and like reconnect a little bit, and they didn't. Because that seemed like a moment where they were getting on, and it seemed like a moment of hope for their relationship because they were laughing and having fun. I mean, it's believable because they're on the run and Paul doesn't want to talk about it, and it's strained and it's working really well. They're not quite seeing eye to eye, but at the same time they are. He does what she says and stuff like that. It makes me worry. Like, when he killed that person, the first thing she went to do, even though she knew that Paul wasn't in the wrong, the first thing she had to do was criticize him so that he doesn't get a taste for the power of killing people. She's still mothering him, which she should. This has never been done before. We don't want this stuff to go to his head, and for him to then think of her as his enemy, he's gonna start like not listening to her, and I think we need her to ground Paul. It's again the possibility of this future he keeps seeing, and what Dr. Keynes was saying about how we don't need a hero and how he wants to be emperor all of a sudden. Nerve-wracking stuff. That's all I think I had to update on. I'm excited to see the Fremen's like main base and to kind of see what they decide to do. Also to touch base with Baron, I think soon. Actually, it looks like this next chapter is the 17th birthday of Feud, so we're back with the Harkonnens again. That's everything. Just you know, fear over here, because I don't have the strongest sense of Paul as a character. I mean, they do. They all have characteristics and personalities and stuff, but for some reason they just don't feel as, you know, as vibrant as a lot of characters I've read before. But I do like him, and he does seem to be a good guy, and I really hope it doesn't go wrong for him and that he manages to be good. I'm wondering if Chani will be a good force or a bad force, and we don't really know her yet. Nerve-wracking times. I'll update you when I have something to update you on. Okay, so it's a few days later again, and I still haven't finished yet. I only have like 50 pages left to go, so I shall be finishing it tonight. I did miss something out last time, and that's how the hell are there Reverend Mothers in the middle of Arrakis, in the middle of nowhere anyway? Like, Jessica mentioned that they're like strays, so maybe they deviated. Since then, she's become the new Reverend Mother, and she's not really explained why they're there, how they got to be there when that happened, so it's their purpose. And it seems like when she went through that ceremony anyway, it wasn't quite the same ceremony that she would have gone through if she did it the way that Reverend Mothers typically do it. They have a slightly different ceremony, but the end result is the same. I just want to know what's going on there. They like drown one of the small worms to get the water of life, and obviously now she has this daughter, Aaliyah. I'm assuming it's pronounced Aaliyah, and she's called like Aaliyah the Strange One. And she's only 2, but she can talk in full sentences and knows all of these different things because she too is a Reverend Mother. She went through the exact same experience that Jessica did. She didn't actually change the poison herself though, which it seems like is what you have to do to be a Reverend Mother. It's just that you also get all of the memories of the Reverend Mother that came before you, and then her memories, and so on and so forth. A whole chain of memories. She's really weird. She's really creepy. I don't blame the people for not liking her. Hera, she's very protective of her, but she sees trouble ahead as far as Aaliyah is concerned, and especially trouble for Paul. Weird, I've only seen her once, and we've not seen her with Paul. Just relationships in this book, they really take a backseat. They're really not as important. We also have Furring. Lady Furring wants to conceive Fade's kid. Assuming they did that, she did that, so now he has a kid out there somewhere that he doesn't even know about. I'm assuming, we've not touched base, we don't know what's happening there. Just know that they're working very closely with the Emperor, and they're wanting to preserve bloodlines. She mentioned how, like, is this one of the bloodlines the Reverend Mother wants me to preserve? Her husband seemed to be in on it. I don't know if he was in on it from the Reverend Mother's standpoint, but he also said something about preserving some kind of bloodline. Is the Emperor in on it? Like, what's going on there? And it seems like they predicted that Fade would become the Baron pretty soon as well. I had a quote from one point, Stilgar talking about Paul. So when are these quotes written, and who is this princess chick? Because I would wager she's going to be relevant at some point. I would wager we're going to meet her. It's interesting though, because none of them are too admirable about Muad'Dib, but none of them are negative either, so we can't tell if he becomes a good guy or a bad guy from them. Which is why I wonder when they're written, because that might affect people's opinions. I don't know, it's interesting. It's making me feel very uneasy. Back to the ceremony where Jess becomes a Reverend Mother. Paul was able to show people around him the future in that ceremony. I don't know if it was the drug he took or it's the spice. Chani said, you're able to make us. It wasn't just her. She said us, I'm pretty sure. And they have that moment then where he sees their future together, where they're, together for a long time, and he makes her see it, and so they're just kind of automatically together now. And we've seen a bit of them since, but I still don't have a good sense of who she is. I have a vague sense. I mean, it's hard because there's so much going on, and there's so much backstory going on, like with what the hell is going on with Feud's kid, and like why are there Reverend Mothers on Arrakis in the first place? Like, I'm assuming this is stuff we're going to find out eventually. Like, I'm assuming it's relevant. And then even the stuff at the forefront a lot of the time can be quite confusing, and stuff that I'm assuming will make more sense as the series goes on. So I understand why it might not fit in, but I personally would like it because some of the relationships are really strong. One of the chapters that I just read was the one with Gurney and Jessica, where he tried to kill Jessica. Just the way it all played out, Jessica had that speech with Paul about how he should marry for love, and I don't know if they're now going to be closer because they still had a pretty strained relationship, although he clearly cared about her. It's very weird. But she's accepted Chani fully now, and I hope things are going to get better between them. The way that Gurney was like asking her to kill him, like opening his robe, and she like slowly closed it. It was lovely. It was great. I love that moment. Howard came up with a theory as to why the Emperor ended the Archreads in the first place, Paul and Nito's house, and it's because between Gurney and Idaho, I've never actually had to say that a lot, Duncan, they had trained some soldiers really strongly, combined them with the Fremen, and they would have an army that would be stronger than the Emperor's army. Which, I mean, the Fremen are stronger than the Emperor's army. They are stronger than these people that come from the prison planet. That conversation was just really interesting. And because of stupid Baron slip up, I knew it was going to be relevant somehow. I just didn't see how yet. He said to Ferring that he's been inspired by the Emperor's army planet, and in this conversation how it reveals that the army planet, how it probably works and how they probably train them and reward them. And so again, if he had Arrakis and used it as a prison planet, and inferring that he's going to create his own soldiers in the way that the Emperor does, because it seems like this thing that a lot of people might suspect but they're not allowed to talk about, because the Emperor doesn't want anyone to get armies as strong as his, especially with Arrakis of all planets, with the Fremen, then it kind of made it sound like the Baron was going to create his own army that would then be stronger than the Emperor's army, which is then puts him in a position just as bad as Leto. So he's now panicking and pulling out, leaving his nephew there alone, which is kind of was going to do anyway, and send him viewed as the hero, which again he was going to do anyway. So it all works out pretty well for him. That obviously gives the Fremen, and Paul an in. The nephew, Reuben, isn't going to have any support. Exciting times ahead. She asked about the home waters of his country again, Chani, right before he was going to try and tame the worm, ride the worm, which he did. That dream he had before was in a cavern, so it could have been then. She's clearly scared, but she's trying to hide it, and it sounds like that could have been the time, and he doesn't talk about it. So these dreams he has that come true, why was he having them? Is it because of the seed thing? Because he said he wasn't the Kiswa Haderach. He wasn't that yet. It was something else, is what he said. He hadn't taken the water of life yet. He hadn't done the whole Reverend Mother ordeal yet. So that would suggest it wasn't a Kiswa Haderach thing, and it's a pool thing. And these dreams that supposedly come true, it's not come true yet. So is it like how he can see the future and it's susceptible to change? Or does it actually come true? I swear he like inferred something that it actually comes true. I might be misremembering. There's lots of foreboding about Paul, about this like the war, the jihad, the religious war that he thinks he needs to stop from happening, and I don't think he even necessarily thinks that he might be the cause of it anymore. He doesn't want to die because he wants to be around to stop it. I don't know when that changed from him being the one with the flags destruction to him now having to not die so that it doesn't happen at all, him like not being a cause anymore and just being around to stop it. That happened at some point, and the flags are already an existing thing. I don't know what the flag means. I can't remember why he has that flag specifically, and he's called Muad'Dib, and he said I'm gonna be Paul Muad'Dib, that I'm not actually Muad'Dib, I'll be different. But the way rumors are spreading about him, it's all coming true and he can't see it. He's not doing so good so far. I love the whole thing about ways change and his speech about how he shouldn't kill Stilgar. I really love Stilgar. I really hope nothing bad happens to him, but the nature of the series, the book so far, is pretty ruthless. I don't think Herbert cares at all what the reader wants. Paul is the Kwisatz Haderach. We all kind of knew he was gonna be. He takes the water of life. He nearly dies. Well, no, it's not necessarily that he nearly died. He could convert the poison, but I'm guessing the reason why he was out for 3 weeks because he had so much stuff to see. And he wants to make water of death, and the way he described it and how Chani thought it was such a bad thing makes it sound like they're killing the whole ecosystem of the planet. How could it spread that far though? I also don't understand fully the biology and the ecology of what's actually going on, which clearly is something that the author does, but I don't think we've had it explained to us enough to be able to understand it yet. Although there is something going on with the water, isn't there? We never found out what it was. They talked about how like they tried to make wells and like dig up water and it'd disappear immediately. And Jessica could tell that Keynes was hiding something about the water, so could Paul in the dinner party. What's going on there? That never came to fruition. And also, there's lots of people ready to fight. It would seem the Baron and the Emperor and a bunch of other great houses are in outer space, like around Arrakis right now. Not entirely sure what they're intending to do. And that's about where I've gotten to. I'm pretty sure a big fight's about to go down. They're gonna try and take over Arrakis. I would wager they either do, but there's some kind of consequence, or there's, danger like right on the cusp of happening, or they fail and like get captured and the next book is gonna start off really depressingly. So I'm excited to find out which it is. So it's been a couple days again, and I've since finished Dune. I was waiting to film my kind of wrap up and conclusion section when I'd read the extra material that I have in the special edition, but I don't think it's gonna happen today, and I don't want to wait any longer because it's already been a couple of days since I technically finished it. So we're doing this now. The last few notes I have from the end of the book, I guess I'll go through them first. Princess Ulan, she meets Paul. Like, she's much more connected than you might expect. Like, I was wondering, was she close to him? Did she date him? Feels like it's gonna be an interesting relationship that they have. It was so weird when they had Aaliyah and she killed the Baron and she also killed his grandfather. The Reverend Mother hates her. She thinks she's really unnatural. She is really unnatural. Just that whole conversation, that whole situation was very strange. They really have killed his son. Leto the second, or Leto the second, is dead. It was so satisfying though, watching the Baron be so stupid and like how much he underestimated everything really came to fruition, and the Emperor just was like, you're an idiot. That was really satisfying. It also seems like Aaliyah hinted to something that she left Paul messages in the future or something. Seems to have a weird communication, like how he found out that she killed the Baron, I think. I want to know more about that. That's weird and interesting. Still don't really know how positive or negative the relationship is. I mean, we have the sense that she at least likes him, but she's very robotic when she talks. It's hard to get like a sense of personality from her, I think. We have a lot of references of Paul being like his grandfather as opposed to his father, which I'm wondering what that in itself might foreshadow or might mean, because also we know that Leto was very caring, a very caring ruler. So suggesting he's like his grandfather might suggest that he's going to be harsh. And then there's also like a direct reference about how Gurney shouldn't distract him when he's fighting the Harkonnen kid. And it kind of directly links to the bull, how the grandfather died by the bull, and Jessica was like, oh my god, the irony. There's a lot of clever like foreshadowing and symbolism and stuff, but sometimes it's heavy-handed in the way that it's dealt with. We didn't need her to say that, we got it. Although I guess she didn't say exactly what she was thinking about, so that might not be the best example, but there are other examples where it can be kind of heavy-handed. We also find out that jihad is inevitable. It's gonna happen with or without him. Like if he dies, then they're just gonna use his name and his symbol to fuel it. It's gonna happen even if he lives. Like, why doesn't he not do it then? Why doesn't he not try and take over? I mean, it's the thing of like, this is a corrupt system, so we'll overthrow it, but in the process lots of people are gonna die and get hurt. So is it really worth it? And we haven't had him kind of directly grapple with the fact that it is worth it. He's just assumed that he's gonna do it. And that just like fight with him and the Harkonnen, there were so many like little things that led to the moment and accumulated in that moment. It was very cool. And then also we have that thing with Fenring come to fruition about how the Emperor orders Fenring to kill him and he doesn't. And there was a quote about it earlier on, but it was kind of in a weird position, like it didn't relate to that chapter, it related to this chapter. I remember reading it and being really confused, like what the hell is this about? Nothing in this chapter. Like Fenring's not even in this chapter. It was a chapter with the Harkonnens. I think it was the Baron and Feud. I think it was Feud when he tried to kill him and it didn't work. And then we also have the fact that he's gonna marry this princess so that he can then become emperor someday, all the while still staying with Chani. The princess is just gonna be a front. She's not gonna have any of his kids. So who's gonna have his heirs? I'm assuming Chani? Chani's gonna be the concubine. I really liked the speech Jessica gave at the very end when she's like, we'll be the wives. That one, it was sweet. It gave me all the emotions because that was such a big thing in her and Leto's relationship. It was a very satisfying end. It was interesting the way it accumulated to that fight. We didn't get to see much of the big fighting outside. I kind of wanted to see more of that. I didn't care so much about the one-on-one battle he had. Yeah, overall there are definitely some things that stopped me from being like, this is the best. The writing, I've already mentioned, is kind of clunky. We don't need to go into their thoughts as much. As the book goes on, we do go into them less and less, I think. It's just unnecessary. We don't need it. The characters in general, they're not always the most fleshed out. I don't fully understand their motives or their personalities. Some of the pacing in terms of the characters I found kind of clunky. Pacing overall, I've heard complaints about, and I can understand why. It didn't personally bother me though. But for the most part, I genuinely don't mind it that much because I enjoyed myself that much, and I also think there's a lot of really clever stuff happening. I think the material itself in terms of the conversations and themes that happen in this are really clever and really thoroughly thought through. The world in general is just so thorough and thought through. I still don't fully understand it. I did read one of the extra chapters that were in here about the ecology, and it did kind of start to explain some stuff that happened when Keynes died, Dr. Keynes, whatever their name was. It didn't fully explain the water situation though, I don't think. And I didn't really understand it. I was too tired to pay attention. But I can definitely see how some people can be masters of Dune and understand it all. I'm definitely gonna continue on with the series. I'm definitely hooked and intrigued. I enjoyed this so much more than I thought, and I also think it's a lot more accessible than I thought it would be. So overall, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I can't give it anything lower because I just was so impressed by it, I enjoyed it so much. Can't be a 10 out of 10 though because of the clunkiness, and also I just don't know if I loved it that hard. But I definitely have a lot of respect for it, and I'm definitely excited to continue on with the series and to watch them film. I'm very excited about the film. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with this ramshamble of a video. If you've read Dune, please let me know what you thought down below. I hope you have an awesome morning, afternoon, evening / night. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!